In the middle of a crowded beach, a great white shark launches a sudden, brutal attack, dragging a swimmer beneath the waves as helpless beachgoers scream in horror. Lifeguards dive into the blood-stained water, racing against time in a desperate rescue attempt. But the terror doesn't end there. This is just one of 6 terrifying shark attacks captured in chilling detail, each leaving onlookers stunned and survivors scarred. Join us in this video for 6 captivating shark encounters that highlight the awe and unpredictability of the ocean. On the morning of January 22, 2000, the famous Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia, was already bustling with activity. It was a warm, sunny Saturday, and hundreds of beachgoers had flocked to the sand, ready to enjoy a perfect day by the water. Known for its lively atmosphere and iconic status, Bondi Beach attracts swimmers, surfers, and families year-round. The clear waters of the Tasman Sea stretched before the crowds, inviting everyone to take a dip. Among the visitors was Helen Swanson, a 52-year-old local who had come with her close friends to relax and escape the city's noise. Helen was a regular at Bondi, often enjoying light swims in the shallows, where she could float and chat with friends without venturing too deep. At 400 pounds, Helen had learned to be comfortable in the water, using its buoyancy to move freely. That day, she seemed happier than usual, splashing around and laughing as her friends watched from the shore. Great white sharks inhabit Australian waters and are often drawn to the area's large seal population and frequent fish schools. Despite regular warnings and shark nets installed off the coast, the risks were always present, but most swimmers felt safe in the crowded, patrolled waters. By midday, the beach was packed and the lifeguards were on high alert, watching the bustling waves filled with swimmers, surfers, and children playing. Helen waded further into the water, still within the shallows but slightly beyond where the kids splashed around. She floated calmly, enjoying the warm water and chatting with nearby swimmers. Helen had no idea that a massive shadow was moving silently through the water beneath her. The great white shark, likely over 15 feet long, was lurking closer to shore, possibly confused by the density of swimmers. As apex predators, great whites are known for their stealth and sudden attacks, often using the element of surprise to ambush their prey. Just as Helen was about to return to shore, she felt a sudden sharp pain in her leg. Before she could react, the water beneath her erupted. The great white breached the surface, clamping its powerful jaws around Helen's left thigh. Helen's scream cut through the air, but the chaos of the attack quickly muffled it. Beachgoers gasped in horror, unsure of what was happening, watching the enormous predator thrash wildly with Helen caught in its jaws. Panic swept across the beach as the crowd realized what was unfolding before their eyes. Parents pulled their children from the water and swimmers scrambled to get back to shore, desperate to escape the unseen threat lurking beneath them. Lifeguards stationed in the watchtower sounded the shark alarm and immediately mobilized, grabbing rescue boards and launching their jet skis toward the scene. Helen struggled fiercely, her large frame making it difficult for the shark to drag her down quickly. She kicked and thrashed, trying to free herself from the predator's grip. Her efforts were heroic but futile. The shark's jaws were too strong, its grip too firm. The water around Helen turned red as the shark pulled her further from the beach. Helen's friends, paralyzed by fear, could only watch helplessly as she was dragged into deeper waters. The lifeguards reached the scene within minutes, but Helen had disappeared below the surface by then. One of the rescuers, Jack Taylor, a seasoned lifeguard with over 15 years of experience, dove into the blood-stained water, hoping to find Helen and pull her back. His partner, Tim Rogers, maneuvered the jet ski nearby, ready to help. Jack dived repeatedly, scanning the murky water for any sign of Helen, but the visibility was poor, and the sense of urgency was overwhelming. Just as Jack surfaced for a breath, he caught a glimpse of the shark's dorsal fin cutting through the water. It was circling, still close by, as if guarding its territory. Jack shouted to Tim, signaling the presence of the predator. They knew time was running out but couldn't give up. Nearby beachgoers were screaming, some pleading for someone to save Helen, others simply unable to look away from the unfolding horror. The situation had escalated so rapidly that many were still in shock, processing the brutality of what they had witnessed. Helen's friends were kneeling, crying, and holding each other, unable to believe what was happening. Jack made one last desperate dive back into the water, swimming deeper than before. He reached the bottom but saw no trace of Helen. Defeated and running out of air, he returned to the surface, his face a mix of exhaustion and sorrow. Tim helped him back onto the jet ski, knowing they had done everything possible. Meanwhile, other rescue teams were arriving at the scene. Boats joined the search, scanning the area for any sign of Helen or the shark. Helicopters hovered above, tracking the water from a wider perspective. Despite the massive effort, there was no sign of Helen. Just the disturbing stillness of the sea, occasionally interrupted by the ripples of retreating swimmers. The beach, filled with laughter moments earlier, was now silent, except for the distant sound of helicopter blades and sirens. Authorities quickly cleared the beach, urging everyone to move back and leave the water immediately. A makeshift perimeter was set up, and investigators began interviewing witnesses to decipher what had happened. As hours passed, the hope of finding Helen alive faded. The once crowded shoreline now stood mostly empty, except for a few lifeguards and officials still searching the area. The water, now calm and seemingly peaceful again, betrayed no sign of the violent attack that had just taken place. The beachgoers who remained watched in disbelief, some still holding their breath, hoping for a miracle. But as the sun began to set, it became clear that Helen Swanson was gone, taken by one of the ocean's most powerful predators in front of hundreds of witnesses. On a chilly April morning in 2010, Sarah Bennett, a 34-year-old triathlete, prepared for a grueling training session off Waipu Cove, a secluded beach along the rugged coast of Northland, New Zealand. Sarah was training for an open-water race, part of her preparation for an upcoming Ironman competition. Her rigorous training schedule often took her to isolated beaches, where she could push herself without distractions. Waipu Cove was one of her favorites, with its expansive stretch of sand and clear waters. By 6 a.m., Sarah was already on the sand, stretching and adjusting her wetsuit. She was alone, as usual, enjoying the stillness before beginning her swim. As she entered the cold water, she felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, her muscles tense but ready. Sarah was an experienced swimmer who had grown up around the water, mastering the waves since childhood. The ocean around New Zealand is home to a diverse range of marine life, including the bronze whaler shark, also known as the copper shark. These sharks are known to frequent coastal waters and can be aggressive, especially when hunting or threatened. Though attacks on humans are rare, their unpredictable nature makes them dangerous. Her strokes were strong and rhythmic as Sarah swam farther from the shore. The sun began rising, casting a faint glow over the water. She felt a sense of calm as she cut through the waves, the chill of the sea invigorating her. After about 30 minutes of swimming, she paused to catch her breath and adjust her goggles, treading water momentarily. She glanced back toward the beach, which seemed distant but still visible. Suddenly, she felt a sharp, crushing pain in her right leg. It was like a vice had clamped down on her calf, cutting through muscle and bone. Sarah's mind raced to process what was happening, but the pain was overwhelming. She looked down, catching a glimpse of a dark, streamlined shape thrashing beside her, a bronze whaler shark. Its jaws were locked onto her leg, and Sarah instinctively kicked at it with her free leg, desperate to break free. The shark released her briefly, but the damage was done. Blood clouded the water, and Sarah's leg was severely wounded, with a deep gash that had severed an artery. Panic surged as she realized how serious the injury was. She tried to keep her composure, knowing she needed to get back to shore immediately. But each kick sent searing pain through her leg, and the blood loss was making her lightheaded. Despite the agony, Sarah forced herself to swim. Her strokes were uneven, her movements sluggish as she struggled against the waves. The shore, which had seemed within reach earlier, now felt impossibly far. She could feel the strength draining from her body, her energy sapped by the blood loss and cold water. Her vision blurred slightly with every stroke, and her head felt heavier. But Sarah's will to survive was stronger than her growing fatigue. She continued to swim, focusing on each painful stroke, hoping against hope that she would reach safety. Her breaths were ragged, and she had to stop frequently to catch her breath, her injured leg barely able to propel her forward. As Sarah's strength waned, a figure appeared on the beach, a local fisherman named Angus MacLeod. He had been setting up his fishing gear when he noticed a strange commotion in the water. At first, he couldn't tell what was happening, but as he saw Sarah's struggling form and the dark trail of blood behind her, he understood the urgency. Angus sprinted into the water, diving into the surf with a strong, determined stroke. He reached Sarah within minutes, grabbing her under the arms and pulling her toward shore. Sarah, barely conscious, felt relief as she sensed someone lifting her. She could no longer kick or help herself, but felt Angus's strong grip guiding her back to the beach. As they reached the shallows, Angus quickly dragged Sarah onto the sand, assessing her injuries. Her leg was a mess of torn flesh, blood, and exposed bone, and she was losing consciousness fast. Angus knew he had to act quickly. He ripped off his shirt and used it as a makeshift tourniquet, tying it tightly around Sarah's upper thigh to stem the bleeding. He then reached for his mobile phone, dialing emergency services as he continued to monitor Sarah's pulse, which was growing weaker by the second. Within 10 minutes, an ambulance arrived, rushing Sarah to the nearest hospital. Her condition was critical, but Angus's quick action had saved her from bleeding out. The medical team worked swiftly to stabilize Sarah, stopping the bleeding and preparing her for emergency surgery. The damage was extensive, and it took several hours to repair the torn arteries and tissue. Sarah woke up days later in a hospital bed, her leg heavily bandaged. The pain was immense, but she was alive. She later learned that the bronze whaler had likely been drawn by the movements of her feet, mistaking her for prey. As Sarah began her long recovery, she struggled not only with the physical wounds, but also with the psychological trauma of the attack. It took months of rehabilitation for Sarah to regain mobility. She underwent several surgeries to repair the damage and lost some of the muscle function in her right leg. Despite the pain, Sarah was determined not to let fear define her. She gradually returned to the water, starting with short swims at a nearby pool and then moving to the ocean when she felt ready. As Sarah regained her strength, she found a new sense of purpose. Inspired by her near-death experience, she advocated for shark safety and water rescue training. She joined local efforts to educate swimmers about the dangers of open water, emphasizing the importance of understanding shark behavior and preparing for emergencies. Sarah's journey from victim to survivor wasn't easy, but her resolve grew stronger with each step. She started hosting workshops on water safety, sharing her story to inspire others. She wanted to ensure that anyone who faced similar dangers would be better prepared than she had been. Her story became well known across New Zealand, not only as a tale of survival, but also as a testament to human resilience. Sarah had faced one of the ocean's most feared predators, and lived to tell about it. It was mid-July, and the Hawaiian sun was already warm on Michael Pratt's back as he zipped up his wetsuit. The beach was alive with the laughter of tourists, the buzz of guides preparing their boats, and the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. Michael, a 29-year-old engineer from Seattle, had arrived on Maui 2 days earlier, eager to explore its famous waters. He was drawn to Molokini Crater, a crescent-shaped volcanic caldera just off the coast, renowned for its coral reefs and diverse marine life. On the morning of July 14, 2001, Michael joined a small group of tourists for a guided snorkeling trip. The tour was run by a local company that has been operating for years, promising an unforgettable experience in the clear waters of Hawaii. The tour guides, experienced locals Brian and Carla, gave safety instructions before the group set off. They explained that while teeming with colorful fish, Molokini Crater's waters sometimes attracted larger predators like tiger sharks. They assured the group that attacks were rare, but the ocean was unpredictable. As the boat motored toward the crater, Michael chatted with other snorkelers, exchanging stories about their travels. He was in high spirits, excited to capture underwater footage on his new camera. As the boat approached the snorkeling site, the water sparkled under the sun, calm and inviting. Everyone on board, including Michael, couldn't wait to enter the water. Around 10:30 a.m., the group began diving into the warm, shallow waters of Molokini Crater. The guides led the way, ensuring everyone stayed close to the boat and within the designated area. Michael marveled at the colorful schools of fish around him and the vibrant coral formations below. It was everything he had hoped for. Peaceful, breathtaking, and full of life. Unbeknownst to the group, however, a dead fish had drifted nearby, its scent slowly spreading through the water. Tiger sharks, known for their keen sense of smell and opportunistic hunting habits, can be drawn from miles away by the scent of potential prey. One such shark, nearly 12 feet long, had been lingering in deeper waters when it caught the scent. Curious and hungry, it began to move toward the snorkelers. Michael was still enjoying the sights when he noticed a sudden shift in the guide's behavior. Carla, one of the guides, gestured urgently for everyone to move back toward the boat. Sensing her alarm, the group began to swim quickly in her direction. A strong swimmer, Michael stayed calm and followed the others, unaware of the predator approaching from below. Just as the group neared the boat, the water erupted in chaos. The tiger shark, mistaking the moving snorkelers for prey, surged forward, its massive body cutting through the water with terrifying speed. Instantly, it clamped its jaws onto Michael's side, the force knocking the air from his lungs. The pain was searing, and he felt himself pulled violently downward as the shark shook its head, its teeth sinking deeper into his flesh. The guides shouted frantically, urging the other snorkelers to get out of the water. Brian, the lead guide, grabbed a long metal pole used for safety and dived toward the struggling Michael, hoping to fend off the shark. Michael, desperate to free himself, punched at the shark's snout, but his strength was fading rapidly due to the blood loss. The water turned red around them, and Michael's movements weakened. The tiger shark, sensing resistance, released him briefly, only to circle back, drawn by the scent of blood. Brian reached Michael and tried to drag him toward the boat, using all his strength to keep Michael above water. Carla and the other guides worked together to lift Michael onto the ship as quickly as possible, the urgency clear on their faces. Michael was pulled aboard, but his injuries were severe. His side was badly torn, the wound gushing blood despite Carla's attempts to stop the bleeding with a makeshift tourniquet. Michael's face was pale, his eyes barely open as the guides radioed for emergency medical assistance. He tried to stay conscious, but his body was in shock, weakened by the rapid blood loss. The boat sped back toward the shore, its engine roaring over the panic-filled cries of the passengers. Brian continued to apply pressure to Michael's wound, urging him to hang on. The minutes felt like hours as they raced back, but Michael's breaths became shallower, his eyes closing despite the efforts of the crew to keep him awake. By the time the boat reached the shore, an ambulance was waiting. Paramedics rushed to stabilize Michael, quickly assessing the extent of his injuries. He was barely conscious as they lifted him onto a stretcher, his pulse weak. Despite the medics' best efforts, Michael's body succumbed to the massive blood loss. He died before he could be transported to the hospital. The tiger shark's attack had taken its toll. The tragic death of Michael Pratt shocked the island community and made headlines worldwide. It was a stark reminder of the unpredictable dangers lurking in the ocean, even in shallow, seemingly safe waters. In response, local authorities launched an investigation, reviewing safety measures for snorkeling tours around Molokini Crater. Efforts were made to increase shark monitoring and improve emergency response protocols, hoping to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. The waters of Hawaii, though beautiful, hold a wildness that cannot be tamed. Michael's final moments, a mix of awe and terror, became a somber tale shared among tourists and locals. A story of how quickly paradise can turn perilous. On a hot afternoon in June 2012, Luis Martinez prepared for a solo spearfishing trip off the coast of Port Aransas, Texas in the Gulf of Mexico. Luis, a 38-year-old experienced spearfisher and free diver, had been diving in these waters for over a decade. He loved the challenge of hunting underwater, and the Gulf had always been his favorite spot. On this particular day, he aimed to catch a large grouper, a prized fish in these waters. Luis loaded his small boat with his gear, a wetsuit, fins, spearfishing gun, and a small first aid kit, just in case. The Gulf was known for its rich marine life, attracting fish and predators like bull sharks. Due to the warm, shallow waters and abundant food sources, bull sharks were frequent visitors to the area. Known for their aggressive nature and territorial behavior, they were responsible for more attacks on humans than any other shark species. By 9 a.m., Luis was anchored about 6 miles offshore. The water was calm, perfect for diving. He carefully strapped on his gear, adjusted his weight belt, and double-checked his spearfishing gun before plunging into the blue. The descent was smooth and the water visibility was surprisingly good, allowing him to see several feet ahead. Luis dove down to a depth of around 40 feet, scanning the rocky seabed for any sign of movement. After about 20 minutes, he spotted a large grouper near a cluster of rocks. Steadying his breathing, he lined up his shot and fired. The spear pierced the fish cleanly, and Luis immediately felt the familiar rush of excitement. He swam toward the thrashing fish, gripping it tightly as it struggled in his grasp. As he began to pull the catch closer, the blood from the wounded fish started to spread through the water, creating a cloud that drifted in the current. Unbeknownst to Luis, this blood had already attracted a bull shark lurking nearby. Sensing the presence of an easy meal, the shark was drawn to the scent and began circling Luis from a distance. At first, Luis was too focused on securing his catch to notice the shark's presence. He adjusted his grip on the fish, prepared to swim back to the surface and return to the safety of his boat. But as he began his ascent, he caught a glimpse of a dark shadow moving quickly in his peripheral vision. Instinctively, he turned his head, and his heart sank as he saw the unmistakable bulk of a bull shark approaching. The shark circled closer, its movements smooth and unnervingly precise. Luis's adrenaline surged as he tightened his grip on the spearfishing pole, knowing that staying calm was his only chance. He tried to swim upward slowly, maintaining eye contact with the shark, as he had learned to do in previous encounters with sharks. But this shark seemed unusually aggressive, likely riled up by the scent of fresh blood in the water. Luis's muscles tensed as the shark made a sudden sharp turn in his direction. With a burst of speed, it charged straight at him. He tried to brace himself, but the impact was swift and brutal. The shark's jaws clamped onto his right thigh, its teeth tearing through flesh and muscle. The pain was excruciating, but Luis's survival instincts kicked in immediately. He used his left hand to grab the shark's snout while his right hand, still gripping the spearfishing pole, thrust it into its side. The shark thrashed violently, releasing its grip momentarily. Luis knew this was his chance to escape. He kicked hard with his uninjured leg, trying to distance himself from the predator. But the bull shark wasn't backing down. It circled back almost immediately, its movements more aggressive as it prepared to strike again. Luis felt a wave of panic but forced himself to stay focused. He held the spearfishing pole before him like a shield, ready to fend off another attack. The shark lunged again, and Luis swung the pole with all his remaining strength, jabbing it into the shark's gills. The predator recoiled, seemingly confused by the sudden resistance. Blood was now pouring from Luis's leg, and he could feel his energy draining rapidly. Desperate to reach the surface, Luis kicked upward, his movements increasingly sluggish as blood loss and fatigue took their toll. Although wounded, the shark continued to circle, eyeing Luis with aggression and hesitation. He could see the surface just a few feet above him, but each stroke felt heavier than the last. Summoning every ounce of strength, Luis made one final push. He broke through the surface, gasping for air as he looked around frantically for his boat. It was only a few yards away, but even that short distance seemed daunting in his weakened state. He spotted a small rope hanging from the side of the boat, his lifeline. With the shark still lurking below, Luis swam as fast as he could, his injured leg barely able to kick. He reached the side of the boat, grabbing the rope with trembling hands. Pain shot through his body as he hoisted himself halfway up, but the sight of the shark's dorsal fin breaking the surface just behind him forced him to ignore it. Luis pulled himself onto the deck using his remaining strength, collapsing in a heap. His leg was a mangled mess of torn muscle and exposed bone, the blood pooling around him. He crawled toward his first aid kit, ripping it open and desperately wrapping a tourniquet around his thigh to slow the bleeding. Luis's hands were shaking, but he tightly tied the tourniquet. He then grabbed his radio and called for emergency assistance, his voice barely audible as shock set in. The Coast Guard responded quickly, and they instructed him to remain calm and keep pressure on the wound. The minutes that followed felt like hours. Luis's body was racked with pain, and his vision blurred as he struggled to stay conscious. He could hear the distant hum of the rescue helicopter approaching, a sound that brought a sense of relief mixed with lingering fear. When the Coast Guard arrived, they found Luis lying on the deck, barely conscious but still alive. They quickly lifted him onto a stretcher, stabilizing him as best they could before airlifting him to the nearest hospital. Luis had lost a significant amount of blood and would require multiple surgeries, but he had survived an ordeal that would haunt him for years to come. Luis's encounter with the bull shark changed him in ways he hadn't expected. Though he had faced many dangers in the ocean before, this one was different. As he lay in the hospital bed recovering from his injuries, he knew he couldn't go back to spearfishing. The ocean, once a place of peace and challenge, had become a source of nightmares. The Gulf of Mexico, beautiful and full of life, had also shown its darker side, a side that Luis would never forget. The sun had just begun to set on the white sandy beaches of the Maldives, casting a warm glow over the turquoise waters. It was March 18, 2014, a day that 30-year-old Emma Chandler had eagerly anticipated since she and her husband Matt booked their dream vacation. 7 months pregnant, Emma was looking forward to a peaceful swim in the shallow waters surrounding their resort. Despite her growing belly, she felt surprisingly light in the water, enjoying the gentle rhythm of the ocean. The couple had chosen the Maldives for its serene beauty, a place where they could unwind before the arrival of their baby. This was their last getaway before parenthood, a baby moon of sorts. After a leisurely breakfast, they spent most of the day relaxing under palm trees, discussing baby names and life ahead. By late afternoon, the heat became more bearable, and Emma suggested a quick swim to cool off before dinner. The Maldives, located in the Indian Ocean, is home to vibrant marine life, including colorful fish, sea turtles, and various species of sharks. The black-tip reef shark is the most common. Usually small and non-threatening to humans, these sharks are curious but cautious, often seen darting through the clear waters near coral reefs. However, they can become aggressive if they mistake splashing or sudden movements for injured prey. The couple waded into the warm, shallow waters near the resort, staying close to the wooden dock that extended a few yards into the sea. Matt kept a watchful eye on Emma, who was enjoying the weightless feeling in the water. She floated on her back, feeling relaxed and calm. Matt playfully splashed water toward her, and Emma responded with a laugh, splashing back. The clear water allowed them to see fish swimming below, making the moment even more serene. Unbeknownst to the couple, a black-tip reef shark, roughly 5 feet in length, was lurking a few yards away, drawn by the sudden commotion. The shark, known for its distinctive black-tipped fins, was hunting near the shallow coral beds and had mistaken Emma's movements for those of a struggling fish. It swam closer, its movements quick and focused. Emma suddenly felt a sharp, excruciating pain in her right leg. For a split second, she thought she had stepped on something sharp, but the intensity of the pain made it clear something was wrong. She looked down and saw the unmistakable shape of a shark, its jaws clamped around her calf. Panic surged through her as the shark pulled her leg, causing her to lose her balance. She screamed for help, her voice breaking the peaceful quiet of the setting sun. Matt, only a few feet away, reacted immediately. His adrenaline spiked and he lunged toward Emma, grabbing her arm to keep her above water. He saw the shark's dorsal fin cutting through the surface, its grip still tight on her leg. Emma's face was twisted in pain, and she struggled to stay afloat. Matt knew he had to act fast. With all his strength, Matt pulled Emma toward the dock, kicking furiously to create splashes that might scare the shark away. Sensing resistance and possibly realizing its prey was not a fish, the shark released Emma's leg but remained nearby, circling menacingly. Matt hoisted Emma onto the dock, his muscles straining from the effort. Blood poured from Emma's wound, staining the water below. Her leg was torn and the pain was intense. Matt tore off his shirt, pressing it against the gash to slow the bleeding. Emma's breaths were rapid and shallow, and tears mixed with seawater on her cheeks. She was trying to stay calm, aware of the baby inside her, but the pain was overwhelming. Resort staff, alerted by the commotion, rushed to the scene. They immediately called for medical assistance, while a few staff members brought towels and first aid supplies. Matt continued to press against the wound, talking to Emma in a desperate attempt to keep her conscious. The minutes felt like hours as they waited for help. An ambulance arrived quickly and Emma was rushed to a nearby hospital. Throughout the ride, she fought to stay awake, clinging to thoughts of her unborn child. The paramedics worked to stabilize her, monitoring the baby's heart rate as well. Emma's body trembled from shock and blood loss, but she remained conscious, her will to survive driven by the life inside her. At the hospital, doctors moved quickly to treat Emma's injuries. She had lost a significant amount of blood, and the wound required immediate surgery to repair the torn muscle and prevent infection. Despite the urgency of the situation, doctors reassured Matt that both Emma and the baby had a good chance of survival. Emma regained consciousness later that evening, her leg bandaged and elevated. She was weak, but relieved to learn that her baby's heartbeat was still strong. The ordeal had been traumatic, but she was alive, and so was her child. News of the attack spread quickly, and the story of a pregnant woman surviving a shark attack soon went viral, drawing attention from media outlets around the world. Emma's narrow escape became a symbol of both human vulnerability and resilience. Though shaken by the experience, she focused on her recovery, determined to bring her child into the world safely. For weeks after the attack, Emma struggled with flashbacks and nightmares. The sight of water filled her with fear, and the scar on her leg was a constant reminder of how close she had come to tragedy. Despite the trauma, Emma's resilience shone through. She channeled her fear into determination, attending physical therapy to regain strength in her leg, and mental health sessions to cope with the psychological impact. Just 6 weeks later, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby girl. Holding her newborn in her arms, Emma felt relief and gratitude. The scar on her leg would never fade, but it was now a part of her story. A story of survival, courage, and the strength of a mother's love. In early August 2006, 6 contestants stood on a sun-scorched beach on the remote island of Pulau Wea, Indonesia. The tropical island, known for its thick jungles and diverse marine life, was the perfect setting for the latest survival reality show Island Warriors episode. Contestants were briefed about the rules. No food, no shelter, only their skills and limited supplies. It was meant to be raw, intense, and filled with challenges. The contestants included 25-year-old Nate Wilson, a survival enthusiast from Oregon, alongside 5 others from different parts of the world, all driven by the promise of fame and a significant cash prize. Nate, in particular, had been preparing for months. His strong physique and experience in camping and fishing made him one of the stronger contenders. The morning of August 7th started like any other on the show, hot, humid, and filled with the buzz of anticipation. The contestants knew that today's challenge was about fishing, a vital skill for survival on the island. Pulau Wea's waters were rich with coral reefs, home to many species of fish, along with various types of sharks, including reef sharks, which are known to be territorial and unpredictable. While they rarely attack humans, their behavior can turn aggressive when defending their territory or if they sense blood in the water. Before the challenge, producers warned about the sharks, advising contestants to be cautious. As the cameras rolled, Nate and his fellow contestants prepared for the fishing challenge. They were given spears and nets to catch as many fish as possible within a set time limit. Excitedly, Nate grabbed his spear and headed into the shallow water, determined to outdo the others. The water was clear, and small schools of fish darted around. Nate waded further, focusing on the fish moving along the reef. The show's crew watched closely from the shore, capturing the action as Nate splashed through the shallows, his spear poised. The other contestants, wary of the warnings about sharks, stayed closer to the shore, using nets and lines to catch fish. Nate, however, seemed more confident, moving deeper with each step. He had already speared a couple of fish, but he wanted more. As Nate continued, he didn't notice a small reef shark approaching from the side. The shark, roughly 4 feet long, was drawn by the sudden presence of blood in the water from Nate's catch. It initially circled him slowly, its movements barely noticeable beneath the surface. Nate was too focused on his next target to realize he was no longer alone. Then it happened. Without warning, the shark darted toward Nate, jaws snapping shut around his calf. The pain was immediate and sharp. Nate screamed, his voice carrying over the water, alerting the crew and the other contestants. The shark, territorial and agitated, maintained its grip, thrashing violently. Nate instinctively struck the shark with his spear, aiming for its head. The shark released its hold momentarily, but the attack wasn't over. Blood streamed from Nate's leg, clouding the water and increasing the shark's aggression. He tried to move back toward the shore, but his injured leg made it difficult to swim, let alone walk. The film crew reacted swiftly. Several crew members rushed into the water, shouting and waving their arms to scare the shark away. Others grabbed life rings and medical kits ready to provide aid. Sensing the increased human activity, the shark retreated temporarily, but continued to circle a few yards away, its dorsal fin cutting through the water. 2 crew members reached Nate and dragged him toward shore, his leg leaving a red trail in the water. Nate's face was pale, a mix of shock and pain. The film crew quickly wrapped a towel around his leg, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. Nate's breaths were shallow, his body shaking from the shock of the attack. The show's medical team, always on standby during challenges, rushed over to assess Nate's injuries. The bite had severed several muscles and tendons, leaving deep puncture wounds. His calf was mangled, but the bleeding was under control. Nate gritted his teeth, determined not to show weakness in front of the cameras, even as his body trembled. The incident forced the producers to halt the challenge immediately. The other contestants were called back to shore, visibly shaken by what they had just witnessed. Nate, however, refused to be airlifted out for emergency care. He insisted on staying, not wanting to leave the competition. The medical team cleaned and stitched his wound on the beach using the show's field hospital tent. While Nate's physical injuries were treated, the psychological impact lingered. The other contestants gathered around, some offering support, others silently processing the reality of their danger. The presence of sharks was not unexpected, but seeing a fellow contestant nearly killed made it clear how real the risks were. The producers huddled together, debating the safety measures in place. They hadn't anticipated such a direct encounter with a shark, especially in the shallows. As the show promised, the contestants were fully exposed to the wild without cages or protective barriers. But this incident had crossed a line. The legal team was called in, and production was temporarily suspended for an emergency safety review. Nate, meanwhile, tried to downplay the severity of the attack. He spoke to the camera explaining that he wasn't afraid and still felt capable of continuing. His leg, now bandaged and wrapped tightly, was swollen and throbbing, but he put on a brave face. The incident made him a fan favorite, with many viewers admiring his determination and courage. By the next day, filming resumed, but with stricter safety measures. Lifeguards and divers were stationed closer to the contestants, and a shark deterrent device was deployed in the water. Despite the added security, the mood had shifted. Nate's injury was a constant reminder of the fine line between survival challenges and real danger. In the following weeks, Nate's leg began to heal, but he struggled with mobility during challenges. Each time he entered the water, he felt fear, but forced himself to push through it. The attack had left a deep scar, both physically and mentally. However, his resolve remained strong, driven by the desire to win and prove that he could overcome even the most unexpected obstacles. The show's ratings soared, with viewers glued to the screen to see the survival skills and raw, unfiltered danger that the shark attack had revealed. Nate's bravery became a central storyline, and the footage of his encounter with the shark was played repeatedly, drawing both concern and fascination from the audience.